On a warm summer evening, Sergeant James Henderson, a young soldier on leave from the military, decided to attend the annual fireworks show with his family. The event, held at a local park, was a much anticipated celebration for the community, drawing people of all ages to enjoy the dazzling display of lights and colors. Sergeant Henderson, his wife Emily, and their two young children, Max and Lily, arrived at the park early to secure a prime viewing spot. They spread out a large blanket on the grass and settled in, eagerly awaiting the start of the show. Around them, other families and friends gathered, creating a festive atmosphere filled with laughter, chatter, and the aroma of freshly popped popcorn. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across the park, the excitement in the air grew. Children ran around, waving sparklers and glow sticks, while adults conversed and enjoyed each other's company. Sergeant Henderson, relaxed and happy to be spending quality time with his loved ones, couldn't help but smile at the joyful scene surrounding him. However, the tranquil atmosphere was soon disrupted by the sudden arrival of a group of rowdy bikers. The sound of their loud, revving engines drew the attention of the crowd as they rolled into the parking lot, their motorcycles gleaming under the fading light. The bikers, a rough-looking bunch clad in leather jackets and adorned with tattoos, dismounted their rides and sauntered into the park. Led by a burly, intimidating man known as Snake, the bikers made their way through the crowd, their presence causing a noticeable shift in the mood. Some attendees cast wary glances in their direction, while others tried to ignore them and focus on the impending firework display. Sergeant Henderson, alert and observant, kept a watchful eye on the group, sensing that their intentions might not be entirely friendly. As the bikers approached the center of the park, their behavior grew more disruptive. They shouted and jeered at other spectators, making crude comments and gestures. Families with young children huddled closer together, trying to shield their little ones from the inappropriate language and actions of the unruly gang. Snake, clearly reveling in the attention and fear he and his cohorts were causing, zeroed in on a nearby family. He approached them with a menacing grin, his eyes glinting with malice. The father of the family, a slight man with glasses, tried to ignore Snake's taunts, focusing instead on comforting his visibly distressed wife and children. Sergeant Henderson, observing the situation from a distance, felt a growing sense of unease. He knew all too well the type of men Snake and his gang were, bullies who thrived on intimidation and chaos. As a soldier, he had faced far greater threats, but seeing innocent civilians being harassed stirred a protective instinct within him. Just as Snake was about to make physical contact with the frightened family, Sergeant Henderson stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Hey, buddy," he called out, drawing Snake's attention away from his intended targets. "Why don't you leave them alone and go back to your friends? There's no need for any trouble here." Snake, surprised by the soldier's intervention, turned to face him, sizing him up with a sneer. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "Looks like we've got ourselves a hero. And who might you be? Tough guy?" Sergeant Henderson, unfazed by Snake's attempt at intimidation, met his gaze steadily. "Just someone who doesn't appreciate seeing good people being harassed. This is a family event, and we're all here to enjoy the fireworks. So why don't you and your friends find somewhere else to cause trouble?" As the confrontation between the soldier and the biker leader unfolded, the crowd around them grew silent, watching the exchange with bated breath. The tension in the air was palpable, and it seemed as though the entire park was holding its collective breath, waiting to see how the situation would play out. Little did Snake and his gang know that they had chosen to mess with the wrong soldier, a man trained in combat, skilled in tactical thinking, and fiercely protective of those in need. As the seconds ticked by, the stage was set for a showdown that would determine whether the fireworks show would proceed as planned or be marred by violence and chaos. Snake, his pride wounded by Sergeant Henderson's challenge, took a step closer to the soldier, his face twisted into a snarl. "Listen up, hero," he growled, jabbing a finger at Henderson's chest. "You got no idea who you're messing with. Me and my boys, we run this town, and we don't take kindly to outsiders sticking their noses where they don't belong." Sergeant Henderson, his stance relaxed but alert, remained unmoved by Snake's threatening words. He had faced far more intimidating foes during his time in the military, and he knew that the key to diffusing a volatile situation was to remain calm and in control. "I'm not looking for any trouble," Henderson replied evenly, his gaze locked with Snake's. "But I won't stand by and watch innocent people be harassed. This is a public event, and everyone here has the right to enjoy it without fear. So, I'll ask you again, please just walk away." Snake, however, was not one to back down from a challenge. With a nod to his fellow bikers, he closed in on Sergeant Henderson, his intentions clear. The other gang members, emboldened by their leader's aggression, began to circle the soldier, their expressions menacing. The crowd, sensing the impending violence, began to murmur and back away, some pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. Sergeant Henderson, assessing the situation, knew that he needed to act quickly to prevent the altercation from escalating further. Just as Snake threw the first punch, Henderson's military training kicked in. He deftly dodged the blow, his body moving with fluid grace as he sidestepped the biker's attack. In a flash, Henderson countered with a swift, precise strike to Snake's jaw, sending the burly man stumbling backward. The other bikers, enraged by the sight of their leader being struck, surged forward, intent on overwhelming the soldier with their sheer numbers. But Sergeant Henderson was prepared. With a flurry of well-aimed punches and kicks, he fended off the attackers, his movements a blur of speed and power. The crowd watched in awe as the lone soldier took on the gang of bikers, his skills clearly outmatching their brute force. Some began to cheer for Henderson, their voices rising above the sounds of the scuffle. As the fight continued, Sergeant Henderson's focus never wavered. He knew that he needed to end the confrontation quickly, before any innocent bystanders got caught in the crossfire. With a final, decisive blow to Snake's midsection, he sent the biker leader crumpling to the ground, gasping for air. The other gang members, seeing their leader defeated, began to hesitate. Henderson, seizing the opportunity, addressed them with a stern voice. "This ends now," he declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Take your friend and go. Don't let me catch you causing trouble around here again." Reluctantly, the bikers gathered up their fallen leader and began to retreat, their tails tucked between their legs. The crowd, elated by Sergeant Henderson's victory, erupted into applause and cheers. As the gang departed, Sergeant Henderson turned to the family he had defended, checking to ensure that they were unharmed. The father, his voice trembling with gratitude, shook Henderson's hand, thanking him profusely for his bravery. The soldier, humble in the face of their praise, simply smiled and replied, "I was just doing what needed to be done. No one should have to feel unsafe, especially not at a family event like this." With the bikers gone and the situation resolved, the fireworks show organizers announced that the display would begin shortly. Sergeant Henderson, his adrenaline still pumping, made his way back to his own family, who had watched the entire incident unfold with a mix of concern and pride. As he settled back onto the blanket beside his wife and children, Henderson felt a sense of relief wash over him. He knew that his actions had made a difference, that he had stood up for what was right and protected those who couldn't protect themselves. And as the first fireworks burst across the night sky, painting the darkness with brilliant hues, Sergeant Henderson allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had done his duty, both as a soldier and as a citizen. The fireworks show would go on, a testament to the power of courage and the unbreakable spirit of a true hero. As the fireworks lit up the sky above, Sergeant James Henderson tried to relax and enjoy the show with his family. However, his mind kept drifting back to the confrontation with the bikers. He couldn't shake the feeling that the trouble wasn't over yet. His instincts proved to be correct when, just a few minutes into the display, he heard the roar of motorcycle engines once again. Snake and his gang had returned, and they looked more furious than ever. The bikers stormed into the park, pushing their way through the crowd and heading straight for Sergeant Henderson. The other spectators quickly moved out of their way, not wanting to get caught in the middle of another fight. Snake marched up to the soldier, his face red with anger. "You think you're some kind of tough guy, huh?" he snarled. "Well, let's see how tough you are when we're done with you." Sergeant Henderson slowly stood up, placing himself between the bikers and his family. He knew that he had to protect them at all costs. "I don't want any more trouble," he said calmly. "Just leave us alone and enjoy the show." But Snake wasn't listening. He charged at the soldier, throwing a wild punch aimed at his head. Henderson quickly ducked out of the way and countered with a jab to Snake's ribs, causing him to stumble backwards. The other bikers immediately joined in, surrounding Henderson and attacking him from all sides. The soldier fought back with all his strength, using his combat training to block their blows and deliver his own strikes. Despite being outnumbered, Henderson held his own against the gang. He moved with lightning speed, dodging their attacks and landing precise hits that sent them reeling. The crowd watched in amazement as the lone soldier took on the entire biker gang. Some even began to cheer him on, shouting words of encouragement and support. As the fight raged on, Henderson could feel himself starting to tire. The bikers were relentless, coming at him again and again with no sign of stopping. Just when it seemed like he might be overwhelmed, Henderson spotted an opening. Snake had dropped his guard for just a moment, leaving himself vulnerable. The soldier seized the opportunity, delivering a powerful kick to Snake's chest that sent him flying backwards into his fellow bikers. They'd all tumbled to the ground in a heap, groaning in pain. Henderson stood over them, breathing heavily. "Had enough yet?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Snake glared up at him, his eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," he spat. "We'll be back, and next time, you won't be so lucky." With that, the bikers picked themselves up off the ground and limped away, their pride badly wounded. The crowd erupted into cheers as Sergeant Henderson returned to his family, who hugged him tightly. They were proud of him for standing up to the bikers and protecting not just them, but everyone else at the fireworks show. As the display continued overhead, Henderson couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He knew that Snake and his gang would be back, and they would be looking for revenge. But for now, he tried to push those thoughts aside and focus on enjoying the moment with his loved ones. The fireworks burst into dazzling colors above them, painting the night sky with light. Henderson knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, just as he always had. He was a soldier, trained to protect and serve, and that was exactly what he would continue to do, no matter what threats came his way. As the final fireworks faded away and the crowd began to disperse, Sergeant Henderson led his family back to their car, keeping a watchful eye out for any signs of trouble. He knew that the battle with the bikers was far from over, but he was ready for whatever came next. For now, he would cherish the time he had with his family, knowing that moments like these were precious and fleeting. And when the time came to fight again, he would be ready, armed with the courage and strength that had always seen him through. The fireworks show had been a night to remember, but for Sergeant James Henderson, it was just the beginning of a longer battle, one that he was determined to win, no matter the cost. The next day, as the town buzzed with talk of the incredible events at the fireworks show, Sergeant James Henderson tried to go about his daily routine as usual. He took his children to the park, helped his wife with errands, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of being home with his family. But even as he went through the motions of normalcy, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He kept catching glimpses of suspicious-looking figures out of the corner of his eye, and he could have sworn he heard the rumble of motorcycle engines in the distance. As evening fell, Henderson's worst fears were confirmed. He was walking back to his car after picking up some groceries when he heard the unmistakable sound of bikes approaching. He turned to see Snake and his gang, along with even more bikers he didn't recognize, coming straight toward him. Henderson quickly ushered his family into the car and told them to lock the doors. He then turned to face the bikers, his body tense and ready for a fight. Snake dismounted his bike and stalked towards the soldier, a wicked grin on his face. "Thought you could just walk away after what happened last night?" he sneered. "Think again, tough guy." Henderson stood his ground, his eyes narrowed. "I don't want any trouble, Snake. Just let me and my family go in peace." But Snake just laughed. "Peace? You should have thought of that before you messed with us. Now you're going to pay." With that, the bikers charged forward, brandishing chains, pipes, and other makeshift weapons. Henderson braced himself for the attack, his mind racing as he tried to figure out a way to protect his family and get them to safety. The fight was brutal and intense, with Henderson taking on multiple attackers at once. He dodged and weaved, using his training to anticipate their moves and counter with his own strikes. But there were too many of them, and he could feel himself starting to tire. Suddenly, there was a shout from behind him. He turned to see his wife, Emily, standing outside the car, holding a shotgun. She had refused to sit by and watch her husband fight alone. With Emily providing covering fire, Henderson was able to push back against the bikers. He disarmed Snake and sent him sprawling to the ground, then turned his attention to the others. The battle raged on, with Henderson and Emily working together to fend off the attackers. The bikers, realizing that they were outmatched, began to retreat, but not before Snake made one last desperate lunge at Henderson. The two men grappled on the ground, trading blows and grappling for control. In the end, it was Henderson who emerged victorious, pinning Snake to the ground and holding him there until the police arrived. As the bikers were loaded into squad cars and taken away, Henderson hugged his wife tightly, grateful for her bravery and support. He knew that they had won this battle, but the war was far from over. In the days that followed, Henderson worked closely with the local police department to track down the remaining members of Snake's gang. It was a long and difficult process, but with Henderson's military training and the support of the community, they were eventually able to bring them all to justice. Through it all, Henderson remained humble and dedicated to his duty. He knew that he had done what was necessary to protect his family and his community, but he also knew that there would always be those who sought to do harm. As he sat with his family in the evenings, watching the sun set over their peaceful little town, he knew that he would always be ready to answer the call of duty, no matter what challenges lay ahead. He was a soldier, a protector, and a hero, and that was a role he would never shy away from. And though the memory of that fateful night at the fireworks show would always stay with him, he knew that it was just one chapter in a much larger story, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds of family and community. In the weeks following the dramatic showdown with Snake and his biker gang, life began to return to normal for Sergeant James Henderson and his family. The town praised him as a hero for standing up to the criminals and protecting the community. Henderson returned to his duties on the military base, falling back into the familiar routines of drills, training exercises, and time spent with his fellow soldiers. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He had simply done what he felt was right to keep innocent people safe from harm. Unbeknownst to Henderson, Snake, and the other arrested bikers were already out on bail, their brief time behind bars only fueling their anger and thirst for revenge. In dark corners of the town's seedy bars, they plotted and schemed, determined to get even with the soldier who had humiliated them. Late one night, as Henderson drove home alone from the base, he noticed a single headlight tailing him on the deserted roads. At first, he paid it no mind, assuming it was just another nighttime traveler. But as the minutes ticked by, the lone motorcycle stayed on his tail, never passing or turning off. A sense of unease prickled the back of Henderson's neck. Suddenly, more motorcycles emerged from side roads, quickly surrounding Henderson's vehicle. He recognized the riders. It was Snake's crew, back for round two. Henderson sharply veered off onto a dusty dirt road, the bikers in close pursuit. Pulling into an empty field, he slammed on the brakes and leaped out, falling into the practice fighting stance he had learned in years of combat training. The bikers circled around him like a pack of wolves, their engines snarling. Snake dismounted and strode forward, a nasty smile on his face. "This ends tonight, hero," he snarled, hefting an iron bike chain menacingly. Henderson's eyes flicked around, gauging his opponents. He was badly outnumbered, armed with nothing but his own strength and wits. Even if he managed to beat Snake, the others would surely overcome him in the end. He needed to even the odds, and fast. Just then, Henderson spotted a glint of metal in the dirt, a discarded wrench, likely dropped by some farmer when repairing equipment in the field. In a flash, he snatched it up, the hefty tool a comforting weight in his hand as the bikers attacked. Snake swung his chain in a deadly arc toward Henderson's head, but the sergeant smoothly ducked underneath, the heavy links ruffling his hair as they whooshed by. Wheeling around, he slammed the wrench into the back of Snake's knee, sending the big man crashing to the ground with a howl of pain. The other gang members closed in, throwing punches and jabbing with knives. Henderson became a whirlwind of action, the wrench and his lightning-quick strikes making short work of the clumsy, untrained bikers. One by one they fell away, nursing broken bones or staggering off in retreat. Finally, only Snake was left, struggling back to his feet with murder in his eyes. He pulled a small pistol from his jacket, aiming it at Henderson with a shaking hand. "I warned you." Snake growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Henderson charged forward in a desperate tackle, knocking Snake to the dirt. They grappled for the gun as a shot fired into the air. Henderson wrestled the weapon away and delivered a final, crushing punch to Snake's jaw, knocking him out cold. Breathing hard, Henderson surveyed the scene, the groaning bodies of Snake's gang the only movement in the still night. He knew it was over now. The bikers had learned their lesson the hard way. They would never dare to threaten him or anyone else in this town again. Calling the police on his mobile to round up the wounded men, Henderson calmly walked back to his vehicle. The rumble of a faraway motorcycle engine made him pause for just a moment, but it quickly faded into the distance. He allowed himself a small smile. No matter what other threats might come, Sergeant James Henderson would always be ready to protect and serve, a soldier to the end. Starting his engine, he headed for home, ready to put this night behind him and return to the loving arms of his wife and children. The bad guys had messed with the wrong man. The morning after his violent confrontation with Snake's biker gang, Sergeant James Henderson woke up feeling sore and bruised, but satisfied that he had put an end to their reign of terror. He shuffled into the kitchen, where his wife Emily was already up preparing breakfast. She took one look at his battered face and rushed over, concern etched on her features. "Oh, James, your poor face. I didn't realize how badly they hurt you last night. You should see a doctor," she exclaimed, gently examining the cuts and swelling. Henderson waved away her worries with a reassuring smile. "It looks worse than it is, honey. I'll be fine in a day or two. I'm just glad it's finally over and our family is safe." But even as he spoke the words, a flicker of doubt crossed Henderson's mind. Was it really finished? He had put Snake and many of his top men behind bars, but he knew from his military experience that defeating an enemy once didn't always mean the fight was done for good. Henderson's instincts were correct. Miles away in a state prison, Snake was already plotting his revenge. Sitting in his cell, the big biker seethed, his stitched-up face throbbing with fresh waves of hatred every time he thought of the soldier who had put him in this cage. When a guard informed him that one of his gang members was there to visit, Snake was surprised. He had assumed the cowardly lot had all scattered to the wind after the brutal failed attack. But his eyes lit up with grim satisfaction when he saw who had come calling. It was Ripper, his most trusted and ruthless enforcer. The tall, gaunt man had a cold, dead stare that unnerved even the other hardened criminals in the biker gang. Ripper leaned in close to the glass partition, his voice a raspy whisper. "Don't worry, boss. We'll get you out of here soon enough. I've already got the boys working on it. That soldier boy won't even see us coming this time," he promised with a thin, cruel smile. Snake returned the grin, a renewed sense of purpose surging through him. "Good man, Ripper. When I get free, Henderson and his perfect little family are gonna pay dearly for crossing us. This is far from over." Back in town, Henderson tried to focus on enjoying the rest of his leave with Emily and the kids, putting the biker threat from his mind. The next couple weeks passed peacefully, filled with trips to the park, backyard barbecues, and all the other simple joys of family life that he missed so much when he was overseas. Henderson started to believe that maybe the worst really was behind them, until the day a police officer showed up at their door, a grim expression on his face. "Sergeant Henderson, I'm afraid I have some bad news. Snake escaped from prison last night, with help from some of his biker buddies on the outside. We have to assume he's coming for you and your family. I think it would be best if you all came down to the station until we get the situation under control." Henderson listened to the officer's words, a sinking feeling in his stomach. He had been a fool to think Snake would simply fade away after a single defeat. The criminal was determined to have his twisted vengeance, no matter the cost. Emily clutched Henderson's arm, fear plain on her face. But beneath the terror, he could see the same steely resolve that had led her to join him in facing down the bikers that night at the grocery store. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the two of them would confront it as a united front. Nodding grimly to the policeman, Henderson began herding his family out to the squad car. This was a battle he had hoped to avoid, a darkness he had prayed would never touch the people he loved most. But if Snake and his crew wanted war, then Sergeant James Henderson would meet them head-on, with all the strength, courage, and righteous fury of a soldier sworn to defend the innocent. This time, he would end the biker menace for good, or die trying. Sergeant James Henderson and his family huddled together in the police station, waiting anxiously for news about Snake and his escaped biker gang. Officers rushed in and out, speaking in tense, clipped tones as they coordinated the manhunt. Emily held the children close, doing her best to soothe their fears even as her own heart raced with dread. Henderson paced the small waiting room, his mind churning. He knew Snake would stop at nothing to exact his revenge. The man had already proven he had no regard for the law or innocent lives. Henderson had to find a way to stop the biker once and for all, before anyone else got hurt. As the hours dragged on, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Henderson rushed to the window and saw a sight that made his blood run cold. Snake and his men had arrived, brazenly attacking the police station head-on. Gunshots echoed through the streets as the bikers exchanged fire with the officers defending the building. Henderson knew he had to act fast. He couldn't let the criminals get inside and threaten his family. Giving Emily a quick kiss goodbye, he promised to end this nightmare once and for all. Then he raced out of the room, grabbing a shotgun from a startled officer on the way. Bursting out a side door, Henderson crept along the wall until he had a clear view of the raging battle in the station parking lot. Snake and his top enforcer Ripper were crouched behind a car, pouring a hail of bullets toward the pinned-down police. Henderson steadied himself, took careful aim, and squeezed the trigger. The shotgun roared and Snake's shoulder exploded in a spray of blood. The biker boss screamed in pain and rage as the blast spun him to the pavement. Ripper and the others whirled to face the new threat, but Henderson was already charging forward, firing as he went. The pump-action shotgun boomed again and again, each shot finding its mark with uncanny precision. Henderson had been trained to be a living weapon, and in this desperate moment, those killer instincts saved his life. Ripper managed to get off a few shots before Henderson reached him, the bullets whining past his head close enough to ruffle his hair. Then the butt of the shotgun slammed into Ripper's face with a sickening crack, smashing him into oblivion. The rest of the bikers scattered in terror as their two leaders fell, fleeing into the gathering dusk with police in close pursuit. Henderson knew the officers would round them up. Without Snake and Ripper to hold them together, the gang would fracture and collapse. Speaking of Snake, where was he? Henderson scanned the bullet-riddled lot, adrenaline still surging through his veins. He spotted a thin blood trail leading away from where the big biker had fallen. Snake was still alive and crawling off to lick his wounds. Henderson followed the gory path, his senses on high alert. It led into a decrepit warehouse at the far end of the street. He shouldered through the door, the dim interior lit only by his weapon-mounted flashlight. Room by empty room he cleared the building, until only one door remained, the manager's office at the very back. He'd heard a pained groan from inside. Gun at the ready, Henderson kicked the door open to find Snake sprawled on the floor, his mangled arm leaking a spreading pool of blood. The biker glared up at him with feverish, hate-filled eyes. "Go ahead and do it then, soldier boy," he spat through gritted teeth. "Finish me off, if you can. You might have won this battle, but as long as I'm breathing, you'll never know a moment's peace." Henderson stared down at the broken man, his finger hovering over the trigger. How easy it would be to end Snake's wretched existence forever, to wipe the evil stain of him from the earth and ensure his family would be forever safe. But as he looked into those rage-twisted features, Henderson realized that if he pulled the trigger, he would be no different from the monster bleeding at his feet. He would be letting Snake poison his soul and turn him into a cold-blooded killer. And that was one battle the sergeant refused to lose. Henderson slowly lowered the shotgun. "You're wrong, Snake. You don't have that kind of power over me or my family. We won't live in fear of scum like you. The only one who will never know peace is you, rotting in a prison cell for the rest of your miserable life." With that, Henderson turned his back and walked away, leaving Snake to the swift justice of the law. As he emerged from the warehouse to the waiting arms of his overjoyed wife and children, James Henderson finally allowed the last bit of tension to drain from his war-weary shoulders. The long nightmare was over. Snake and his gang were finished, and the town was safe at last, thanks to the unwavering courage of one unbreakable soldier. Henderson knew other threats would someday come calling, as they always did, but he would be forever ready to stand tall and defend what mattered most, secure in the love and support of his family. Together, they could overcome any challenge, weather any storm, for they had already proven that the strongest weapon of all was the unshakable bond of those united in hope, faith, and loyalty. And no force on earth, from lowly street criminals to the mightiest of foes, could ever hope to defeat that. Here is the final part of the story, Part 8, written in about 900 words using simple English in the third-person style. In the days following Snake's defeat and arrest, a sense of peace and normalcy slowly returned to the town. Sergeant James Henderson gave his statement to the police, detailing the biker gang's campaign of terror and his role in stopping them. The authorities assured him that with the amount of evidence and charges against them, Snake and his crew would remain safely locked behind bars for a very long time. Henderson finally allowed himself to relax, the coiled tension that he had carried for so long loosening its grip on his heart and mind. His wife Emily noticed the change in him immediately. The way his smiles came easier and his laughter sounded free and unburdened. As the couple sat on their porch swing one evening, Emily rested her head on her husband's shoulder with a contented sigh. "I'm so proud of you, James," she murmured, "for everything you did to keep us safe, even when the odds seemed impossible. You're a true hero, in every sense of the word." Henderson squeezed her hand, gazing out at the quiet street. "I was just doing my duty, honey. As a soldier and as a husband and father, you and the kids mean everything to me. I would go to the ends of the earth to protect this family." In the peaceful lull that followed, Henderson's mind drifted to the future. His leave would be ending soon, and he would have to return to his responsibilities on base. He knew that more missions and deployments lay ahead, more battles to be fought in service to his country. But he also knew, with a steadfast certainty, that no matter where his duty took him, the love and strength of his wife and children would be with him every step of the way. They were his anchor, his guiding light, the very reason he donned the uniform and put his life on the line. A sudden burst of laughter caught Henderson's attention. He looked over to see his son and daughter chasing each other around the front yard, their young faces glowing with innocent joy. In that moment, he realized that this was what he had been fighting for all along. Not glory or acclaim, but the simple, perfect beauty of moments like these. The next morning, as Henderson prepared to return to the base, word came that the mayor and town council wanted to honor him for his heroic actions. They had planned a special ceremony where he would be presented with a medal and a key to the city. Henderson was humbled by the recognition, but he knew he couldn't take all the credit. As he stood at the podium facing the cheering crowd, he made sure to acknowledge the bravery of his fellow officers and the unshakable support of his beloved family. "I stand here today not as a lone hero, but as a representative of all the courageous men and women who serve and protect, both at home and abroad," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "It is their strength, their sacrifice, that keeps us safe and allows us to enjoy the blessings of freedom and peace." He turned to Emily and the children, his eyes shining with love and pride. "And to my amazing wife and kids, you're my reason for being, my heart and my home. Your love gives me the courage to face any challenge, and the knowledge that no matter what happens, I will always have a place to belong." As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Henderson knew that this was a moment he would treasure forever. Not because of the accolades or the praise, but because of the unbreakable bonds of family and community that had proven stronger than any threat or foe. In the years to come, the story of Sergeant James Henderson's stand against the biker gang would become a local legend, a shining example of the power of courage and conviction in the face of evil. And though other challenges would arise, as they always did, the town knew that they could weather any storm, as long as they stood together in solidarity and hope. For Henderson, the greatest reward would always be the love and devotion of his wife and children, and the knowledge that he had made a difference, no matter how small, in keeping the world a little safer for the ones he cherished most. And so, as the sun rose on a new day filled with promise and possibility, Sergeant James Henderson stepped forward to meet it with a full and grateful heart, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. For he knew that with the strength of his family and the courage of his convictions, there was no challenge he could not overcome, no battle he could not win. And that was a truth that would endure, long after the medals had tarnished and the accolades had faded. A shining beacon of hope and resilience, forever lighting the way forward.